Welcome to another Wide Flank Dev Talk. Today, Sean and I will be talking to Nicholas O'Brien, the founder of SA Games, who just released Bundle of Joy, a minigame romp about becoming a parent during the pandemic. I think the full game got released yesterday. I played the demo. Sean played the full game to the credits. We intentionally didn't play it together. It didn't feel like that kind of game. I don't know, Sean, what was your experience last night?
Yeah, like it was a very introspective, it felt like a one-to-one relationship with whoever the creator of the game happens to be. Who's to say? But truly, yeah, it was something that I kind of wanted to dive into just alone. And yeah, I think that's as good a place to start as any, Nicholas. How directly are you pulling from your own experience when crafting both the design, because the design of the game is this very specific binary between the mini games and the reflections. So what of yourself do you bring to those two pieces of the game?
Yeah. First of all, thanks so much for having me. I really appreciate coming on. It's great to chat. And I'm so glad that you guys played Bundle of Joy and that you've enjoyed it. I would say 80% is pulled from personal experience.
Sure.
In the development process, I did personally reach out to other dads that I knew that went through a similar kind of time frame of when they became a parent. Again, during the pandemic, the game takes place during late spring of 2020. And that's when I had my firstborn. So, so I definitely talked with other people a little bit about it. And then I also pooled from a larger group too. I kind of posted some stuff to Reddit, some messages to Reddit and other dad-based message boards that I'm subscribed to.
Sure.
And it's just does anybody want to unpack some weird stuff that happened to you during that time frame? And there was some volunteers that wrote, some people that wrote very short things, and then a couple of people that wrote very long, in-depth, detailed descriptions of what they went through, which was incredible and really meaningful. And so some of the aspects of the narrative are specifically pulled from that, they're not autobiographical.
Okay.
They're kind of more autobiographical adjacent, or they're pulling from other people's experience that I, after getting this material, I asked, hey, could I, try to incorporate some of these elements into the story?
So you were pretty upfront with these people of this is for a project. It's
100%.
Share what you want to about.
In fact, a kind of funny anecdote about that is that one of the message boards that I posted to is a fairly well-known Brooklyn-based message board for parenting. And I posted to it, and the owner of the message board contacted me back, and they were like, this is very, very close to soliciting focus group material. And if you want to do that, you need to pay to do that on the message board.
Whoa.
And I was like, I'm not trying to run a focus group
here.
I'm literally just wanting to hear from other dads that had this same experience, which existed on the platform anyways. And they're like, I get it. That's totally cool.
Because a focus group is a commercial spatial thing.
Right.
Whereas
go ahead.
Continue.
Sorry.
No, I was just going to riff about how this game feels closer to it's a commercial release. It's available on Steam. You can play a demo right now, dear listener. But it does feel closer to it's a deeply, deeply personal thing.
Yeah.
For sure. 100%. Yeah. And I think it was for them. They saw a Google form that I linked to, and they were like, I don't know about this Google form. And then I kind of explained the project in more. Yeah, exactly. And I explained the project in more detail, and they were like, so I get this. This is totally fine.
It's really interesting. Was that always your thought from when you conceived of the idea of the game? Were you always thinking and I'll pull from other people's experiences specifically? Or was that while you were crafting the game, you were it'd be cool if I had a little more data on the subject and just more, how were other people feeling? Is there more stuff I could incorporate? Was that, how did that come about?
Yeah, that's a really good question. It wasn't, truthfully, it wasn't in the very, very initial design process. But kind of got to a certain point where dads started playing some of the like early
Yeah.
builds of it and some of the like, play testing. And um were like kind of giving me feedback voluntarily anyways, where they would be like, oh yeah, or they would like start to play a mini game and they're like, oh yeah, I remember that.
Been
And like
there.
yeah, and they would kind of have this
Just
moment.
so dad.
Yeah. Yeah.
Cracks a beer. Like,
Yeah, they would like roll up their sleeves, right? And then, anyways, yeah,
I'm
it
dying at
was this
that.
like kind of funny thing that yeah, the people that were playing it were like kind of in this process where they wanted to share some of what they had experienced too, right? So I was, as I was playtesting it, I started seeing that there was this natural inclination for people to want to share what they had experienced. So I was like, how do I fold that in? But another way of kind of answering that question is maybe thinking about like SA Games as a project, as like a studio, which is it's a very research based studio. Not to like jump the gun on any questions that y'all have, but like
Dude, jump it.
Go
Pop off.
Truly, it's
awesome.
Yeah, go.
Cool. My background is like from a like a fine art, contemporary art background, and what in that kind of space would be called like a research based studio practice, which is like, I'm interested in things in the world. I want to know more about them, and then I want to make work about the things that I find, or some of the stories that I uncover, or some of the things that I find mysterious and can't reconcile in my own head. So I want to inflict other people with this thing. And so, yes. That's always been this kind of ethos in SA Games, right? Is to try to make projects that still are taking that approach, taking that research-based approach and bringing it into a play, product, right? A product that is interactive and has, gameplay and game mechanics involved. So as I was developing it, I was like, I remember this is like an important part of what I do as a game designer.
My
so
practice.
Exactly. So I want to bring that back in to the fold. And yeah, people were very generous and really kind with what they were, willing to contribute and relive,
So it is this like collective, like it's a story. It's the universal dad. And I did want to mention like the we've sort of described the game, and I think we should describe it a little bit more. But like the game opens with like you're a dad. All right, we're all dads here.
Everyone's a dad.
And I don't want to get too much into my own experience of it as much. Like this is about you, but we're recording. But the point is like as I'm playing, one of my first thoughts playing the game is like, I'm not a dad. So when the game is very generously like, you're a dad, like this is I went through this experience of starting the game being like, oh, I'm shadow playing a dad, like is this weird? But as like the game went on, it was like, oh, I don't want to issue conclusions about your game, but it was like, oh, being a dad is like being a person. Like it's you are a dad, sure. But and so like I guess I don't know what the question is in there, but it's something about like how deliberate was the stated goal of like is it about dads because like you're a dad, or like were you trying to use dad as like a prism of like broader experiences in the way that like a work of art of any form can be, or
that's like a prism is like I love that phrasing.
Thank you.
Like to a certain extent, but I think I got really good advice from my partner, actually, when I was first designing the game. And there was a point in the design process where I was like, I'm really speaking from my personal experience, and I really don't want to minimize a partner's experience too. So much about becoming a parent, if you're fortunate enough to have a partnership to become a parent into, so much about that process and the changes, the emotional changes and the psychological changes that happen in that time are embedded in the way that your relationship to your partner changes. And so I was struggling with this thing where I was like, I don't want to just make that character in the game a foil right?
Right.
Or just like, or a ghost, right? I wanted to make that person also present in the project. And so I started trying to like write some stuff that was also told from their perspective as well. And the advice that I got from my partner
I was
was
gonna
like,
say, yeah. Was this
stick to
based
what you
on?
know.
Sorry, keep going.
Yes. No,
Stick to what you
totally.
know. Yeah.
100%. Yeah. And her advice was incredible early on. They just saw me struggling to write
Yeah.
this alternative perspective. And I, I wanted to do it justice. I wanted to be faithful with that voice. I wanted to write about that experience. But yeah, it was one of those things that was like, you know what, you have your dad experience, you have
Yeah.
your dad perspective, stick to that, and that it's not like that perspective is saturated in the game environment anyways, like, stick to what you know.
Yeah. It's well, when you say game environment, do you mean like the game that you've constructed or like the broader game?
Like the industry, quote unquote,
industry,
right?
Yeah.
Yeah, because like part of me wanted to make a shisty joke about like a lot of AAA games about dads, but it's like those games are so like surface level. I mean, maybe they go deeper. I don't know. I haven't actually like played through Last of Us or God of War or anything, but it's like the thing I want to put on this game is how clearly it's like the experience of an individual, and like it's so I think that comes through pretty strong. But can we like let's Alon, do you want to describe the game a little bit, or do you want to
Yeah, I pulled the minigame romp. I think that's like a direct quote from the Steam page, right? But what a lot of people seem to be saying, and Sean and I were saying this to each other also, is like a WarioWare like sort of like. So Sean you mentioned before, there's kind of like two modes. There's taking care of the baby, and then there's like reflecting on your day. Taking care of the baby is just insane and really stressful, and the music is just like making your ears bleed.
It's just like blaring, like,
and it never
this
stops.
is fun. Yeah,
I love the fact that like someone in our Discord played and was like, "Oh, I needed more time to like get ready for the mini games," and
I was stressed like playing the mini games,
and I was like, "No, dude,
dog.
You don't get time. You're just in it, right? When you're in it, you're just in it, and there's no time because it's the baby decides the time, and then the other part of the game is just it's like journaling, breathing, slow down. You did okay. It's a very So is that an okay description of the game?
Yeah, I think it's a great description. Yeah. The game, I think, like, to kind of add a little bit more context or a little bit more like wraparound of that, is that the game plays in day cycles, right? So
right.
So like you're thrown into these mini games. You don't get a lot of time to think about what you're supposed to do in them. There are directions on how to execute the task of the mini game. But you kind of perform a handful or 3 of those mini games, and then you get this kind of downtime period that's like basically like nap time for baby. And though babies at that age like nap a lot more than just like one time a day, just works mechanically. So give me a little bit of cut me some break. But yeah, so then there's this downtime period, and that period is when you kind of do this like there's a little bit of a branching narrative element there where you're reflecting on the experience, you're reflecting on what it means to you to be a dad, what it means to you to be like a partner, what it means to you to be also a person that's missing or to a certain extent mourning autonomy. I think that's like something that a lot of, I think, dads that I've talked to over since becoming a dad really have like talked about, right? That like the kind of initial whiplash that happens is like, you're like, oh, I'm like beholden to this person. I can't just like walk out the door, like go get a coffee or like meet up with people tonight if I want to. The whole element of like spontaneity and autonomy is like, thrown out the window, right? So you're kind of reflecting on all those things in the downtime period, and then there's another set of mini games after that, and then the day ends with this kind of another kind of smaller moment of then reflecting, and that stuff is kind of more geared towards like the partnership stuff and like roles and responsibilities and how how being tired at the end of the day is also making you feel.
And it's very deliberately organized in that way, would you say? Of like middle of day, it's like, I'm figuring shit out, and end of well, because when it hits the end of the day, often enough, it's just like, I'm tired. I can't process anything.
Yeah.
Like, so that was like a pretty deliberate organizational, like,
Yeah. That's kind of the thematic
division.
structure of the writing. Yeah, for sure. Yeah. And what's been like, yes, totally intentional. I would say that then, not to spoil too much,
yeah,
but like as you go into the further days, that end of day starts to take on this other role, a little bit, not too much, but the text in that and the things that you're thinking about in that moment start to take on a little bit of a different tone.
Sure. I mean, yeah, like, there's two things I like.
I'm the one who only played the demo. I'm the only one who doesn't know.
And like the listener, like, should play the game, you know, like they should experience it on their own terms. Like, absolutely. And it's I'm not just trying to, like, you know, push the game, but it was like I played it in one sitting, and like as the game was unfolding, like it felt like this very deliberate arc of like, oh, like I'm getting it, like I'm getting it. But to go back to what I was saying about like how much I was reflecting on the reality that like I'm not a dad, but like a dad's just a person. Like the game did resonate like very emotionally, just in terms of like an individual's experience. And like there's a great deal of like really honest negative self-talk in the game, which felt like pretty striking for not even just like it was just a striking, you know, piece of writing. And I guess I see this is dangerous because I'm like getting sucked into it. I don't want to be like, and then later in the game this happens, but it's like no,
watch it.
Yeah, exactly.
I think that I'm so glad that you came back to that point, because I think that's something kind of where I started to be like, this is working, right? Like where I, as a designer and a developer, a lot of the time, you know, you're kind of like, is this a thing? You know, like there's moments where you're kind of like looking over your shoulder where you're like, I think this is working, but you know, that's why playtesting is so important in the process. But I like telling this anecdote where I brought a pretty early demo of the game to this thing called Play NYC. That's a kind of newer conference, game-focused conference based in New York. And this past year, I should say, they partnered with this organization called Anime NYC, and which is a huge, it's like a Comic-Con scale conference. It's huge, right?
Holy moly.
So Play NYC was kind of the smaller part of this much larger thing.
Sure.
So it's kind of intimidating.
There's foot traffic.
Tons of foot traffic.
Yeah.
100%. But I realized I was kind of getting onto something when this kind of like maybe preteen or teen came over and started playing the game. Which was like was happening. You know, there's like younger people at the conference.
They like anime.
Yeah, they sure do.
Keep going.
They sure do. And so came over, and then their mom like kind of sauntered over, like walked over and came, and they like, you know, were like kind of not paying attention, and then they kind of like looked down and they were like, oh, and they were like kind of did this double take. And then this like smile just started like creeping across their face.
The mom's face.
Yes.
Yeah.
And they started like ribbing the kid a little bit, you know, kind of like, not so easy, is it? You know, like try to
that's
like,
you.
kind of exactly. And the kid played through the demo and had a good time. They were like, oh, this is really cool. Thanks for letting, you know, just was very nice.
Yeah.
And then the mom leaned over the table and was like, this is birth control. And I was like,
God.
Great.
It's a really harsh take, but like,
and she was like, keep going. And I was like, okay.
We need more birth control in this world.
Bundle of joy, solving the population crisis.
Yeah. That's what I should have. That should have been my marketing campaign.
That's the slogan.
But no, it was. I think the long arc of this is to say that I think that the game lands very particular for people that have gone through that experience personally. But I think it also, the content of the game is really, I really like to talk about how a lot of the game is just about like self-doubt, right? It's not necessarily about, you, as a dad, you feel these things, but as an individual, when you're confronted with a monumental challenge, I think immediately you go to places that are difficult, right? You go to mental and emotional places that are not just hanging out, right? There are like places that uh, are very worthwhile and exploring, but aren't like
Yeah.
top of mind, right?
Hmm.
And so, yeah, so for me, a lot of the game, the negative self talk that you talked about, I think really resonates with people that haven't had any kind of parenting experience whatsoever, because I think it's that experience is just an individual experience, right?
Truly. Because the stuff with the baby, it was just like, how hard is changing a diaper every single morning? Like, because and truly, it's like intellectually, I can engage with like, seems like it sucks to have to wake up at 4 a.m. and wipe
Yeah.
poop off of
Yeah.
a human. But I'm not trying to be callous about it. I'm trying to be honest about
Yeah, yeah,
like,
yeah.
I
100%.
don't know that I haven't lived that experience. But then like the deeper reflective stuff, like, yeah, I've lived that. Like I've reflected. Like
100%.
And that's it's interesting because like in a weird way, I guess you would call it a role playing game because you're playing a dad. Yeah, that's not
Sure.
me. I don't have a baby, but
Mhm.
role playing game is usually so heavily associated with like something fantastical and not real.
Mhm.
But
Mhm.
like this has such a connection to like personal experience, not just of having a child, but like you said, anything that's like I've never played these mini games, so they're super hard. I don't know what's going on, and I'm like,
Right.
oh, I
Sure.
suck at this game. That's instantly where I go. I'm just like, oh,
Right.
I'm terrible. Oh, I blew it. Stressed out. You know what I mean? And then it's like, and then the game starts negative talking or self doubting or whatever, and I'm like, wait, that's me.
Yeah, right. Yeah. And I think like you're touching on something that I think from a design perspective was like so important to me, was like to have those moments of identifying with like failure, right? Identifying with like getting stressed out or not performing the task, or like messing up in some way. But that the game then very directedly kind of gives you positive
The
reinforcement.
positive
Yes.
self-talk.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so the
truly.
game, so there's this kind of like narrative voice in the game that chimes in every once in a while, and they're kind of like, it's okay. Like,
Yeah.
this is part of the game. Like,
Yeah.
this is part of this experience.
Yeah.
And like, this is going to happen. But it doesn't mean that you can't, keep going, or it doesn't mean that, you're failing colossally, right? You
Mhm.
just like, that was stressful, and that's okay. And I think that was really important in terms of kind of going back to a question that you talked about before about, or we touched on in terms of like AAA representation of like
Oh, sure.
fathers.
My
and
wife is
dads.
dead and I'm trying to connect with my child.
Right,
like,
right.
yeah.
And the only way that I know how to do that is like through violence, usually, which like
Sure.
sucks.
Sure.
Or is
Yeah.
like just anyways, we can
It's
talk about that more.
reflective. That's a deeper comment.
Yeah.
But keep going.
But I just wanted to make something that can be like, for lack of a better term, like Joel being like a piece of shit or whatever, or like Joel being like not a good dad in certain moments in the experience. It's like in the game, you're meant to feel bad about being a bad dad, right?
Yes.
And like instead, I wanted to create something that was like, no, what you're doing it's neither good or bad. It's part of the process.
Yes.
And like, you're just in the process, and that's okay. So stay in the process, stay like present as much as you can, and you'll come out the other end with something, right? And not to like, again, spoil the end of the game, but you'll come out the other end with some emotional reconciliation for those like feelings of guilt, or those feelings of frustration, or those feelings of like anxiety or stress.
Yeah, and I'd say that part of the game is also like it's constant changes, but it's also constant repetition, and it's like again, I'm not going to be like, is this what being a dad is like? Like I have a question written down that's like, how do we talk about the game rather than like, hey Nicholas, what's being a dad like? Because like as I was playing the game, I was just like, I kind of want to just talk to this person about being like, what's it like to be a dad? But
it's funny because I've had a couple people play the game that are like, are you okay? Like, because like the game does have these like darker themes, and there's like a lot of like we were talking about these negative self-talk, and I'm like, like, but that's a reality, like I'm okay, I'm fine, but like that's like part of the process. I think a lot of dads go through that process. But I think like that the thing that you're touching on about like the repetition and the monotony,
That's
that
what I was going
is,
towards.
I think that is definitely such a core component of those early days. Um, so much of kind of the genesis of this game was that when I was preparing to become a father, I was trying to do the good thing of like reading the literature and talking to other dads
Yeah.
and talking to my family, who I'm thankfully still close with, to like talk about what's looming and what I should expect and so on and so forth. And I noticed that there, especially in like the literature, there wasn't like a ton of stuff about that like 0 to 3 month time. It
Whoa.
kind of, there's a lot
like
of stuff that's like leading up to it, a lot of stuff like prepping for labor and, you know, getting your birth plan in order and all that
Buy
stuff.
this and have this like
Make
ahead
sure
of
that you have
time.
this checklist.
Right,
Exactly.
right.
Yeah. And then there's stuff like, no, go ahead.
I was gonna say I've heard about the drop down menu, that it's like there's just a list of things of like, is it pee, is it poop, is it hungry? If it's not those things, I don't know. Like,
Yeah.
Again, not a dad.
and then the literature kind of picks up again, and I think people's experience or memories really pick up again, kind of like really closer to 6 months onward. And so I was like, that's weird. I was like, that's really odd, you know. Or like I just noticed it. It was glaring to me.
Yeah.
And then I became a dad, and I realized that in those months, you're really just like trying to survive, right?
Yeah.
You're
It's
really
day
just
to
trying.
day.
You're in the
You're trying to get
trenches.
to the end of the day. Yeah. And so that was like such this core design concept, right? Is that you're just like, okay, this is going to feel repetitive. It's going to feel stressful.
Yeah.
It's going to feel unwieldy at times with these kind of intermittent breaks. But I just need to get to the end of the day without like totally losing it.
Truly, and I think that's telling that like the game, to clarify, like this isn't about raising a baby as such.
Totally.
This is
Right.
about those early days of child rearing. I don't think I even like clocked that explicitly while playing
Same.
it. Like,
Yeah,
oh yeah, this
but-
is like baby.
Yeah. And it's not like, I think that that's also like this thing we were kind of talking about genre a little bit in terms of like RPG. It's also like not a simulator, right? Because it's not like baby doesn't like age, right? And baby doesn't like, you're not like, oh, I fed the baby enough and now they have muscles, you know. It's like, it's like not, you know, or whatever. Like,
That'd be pretty cool though.
The DLC
You've discovered a baby sword.
Yeah, right.
Baby's
exactly.
going on an adventure now.
Yes,
Whoa.
baby quest. So I think that also was kind of this like thing that was initially hard to communicate with people that were like getting into the game. You know, they're like, oh, so you start and it's like day one, and then like then does it like advance time, and then you like go to like the next months? And I'm like, no. It's really about this like one moment and trying to fill in some of the gaps that I noticed, and I think other parents do too, about what truly happens in those times. And in some way, it was like a way to like remember that stuff, because you're like sleep deprived,
Right.
and stressed out, and you know, just trying to do your best. And that in a lot of ways you kind of black out a lot of that stuff, or disassociate from it slightly. So I wanted to make something that was like trying to recapture that moment, and also trying to recapture a moment that I think is really important for all parents to have in those like early moments, which is like just trying to be as present as possible, right? Like it's really hard to be present in those early months when you're like so much is stewing and so much is boiling in your head. But like to kind of build that like really great relationship with your kid, it has to kind of start in some of those moments. Otherwise, like you're kind of, I don't know, not to talk universally, but my fear is that then you're like kind of playing catch up a lot of the time.
Yeah. So what, I mean, you kind of answered the question, but I think there's more to dig into there. I was going to ask you like, why mini games? Like, why was it this kind of game felt the most representative to you, or like representative for you and your experience? And like, I was curious, did it start there, or did you try a couple different things and this just like felt the best and felt the most right?
This is a great question. There is about a year-long prototype that I made of a similar theme that was way more of a walking simulator. And it was way more of like, had a very specific setting and a very specific place. And, you know, still similar themes, similar ideas, similar kind of moments of reflection. But it was all structured around this one, basically this one location, and this kind of one specific moment that then would act as this kind of like microcosm of other things. But in that design, there was a stone skipping mini game,
Whoa.
and you would skip the stone, and based upon like how far you could skip the stone, it would not exactly like unlock different things, but it would allow you to explore different ideas, or it kind of did this thing of like calming you down, right? Like performing this task did this thing of like, okay, it settled your nerves, and now you're able to like unpack some of the emotional space.
Cool.
And when I made that,
cool.
Sounds cool.
It was great. But I got that. I made this prototype, and I got really good feedback from like a game designer that was like, that's where your game is. It's in the tension between performing that task and having that task then unlock something emotionally for the player
within the player and the avatar. And
And so I was like, okay, cool. Let me start over. And so then I kind of like made a very quick prototype that was like much more loose, and did a couple of like the minigame ideas or concepts that are now in Bundle of Joy. And it kind of clicked where like, oh, this is where that tension lives, right? In the quickness and the speediness and the chaoticness, that felt more true to the experience. So I think that was like kind of part of how that happened. I also got like this kind of other feedback in that process where somebody kind of was like, in the previous version, people really responded to the writing, and they were like, this writing is so good, but where the writing, which was very nice, but where the writing falters, I was like, me just like, of course it was. Anyways,
everybody loved my writing.
yeah. It just really knocked it out of the park. But they were like, where the writing falters is where you start to tell me how I'm feeling.
Yeah.
Cool.
And where you say like, I'm feeling like I was writing in the narrative, like now I'm feeling this way.
Totally.
And they were
makes
like,
sense.
The game should do that. The gameplay should do that, not the writing, right?
Yeah.
If you're having to write to me what the emotions are that I'm experiencing, then the writing is failing in some way.
So I got two I got to choose which I want to ask about.
Which path?
That's which path, baby quest. Truly, well, okay, just first of all, no, I'm going to talk about the fact that the game prompts the player with choices at a certain point. Like it's because the player avatar is like reflecting on things, and then you get like, it's like how I'm feeling like, and you literally provide the player with some of their own language to work with.
100%. Yep.
And I got a little hung up there because I was like, I kind of don't want to reveal one of the mechanics of the game, but I'm just going to go for it. And if you don't want us to talk about it, say so, and we'll cut it out. Literally at the end of the day, there's a text box, and you can literally just write. You give the player space to write. And I started writing stuff in there, and I haven't said it yet, but I was crying playing your video game. I kept getting emotional playing the game. Like it was like, but like truly like it speaks to the fact that part of the feedback of the game was like, don't tell me how I feel. So it's like you're giving the player multiple options of like, yo, write how you feel, one, or two, like play with expressing how you feel. And I guess I'm more curious mechanically about the latter. Like how do you think about choice tree? Not how do you think about choice trees, but like how do you think about like that sort of narrative design in games, but like in this game specifically, I suppose.
Yeah, totally. It's an awesome observation, and it's not spoiling, I think, at all. It's like it's in the same
it's in
page.
The trailer,
you can see,
right?
And it's in the trailer
Truly?
too.
Okay,
yeah,
cool.
So that you see that there's like a moment that you can journal.
Leave it in.
Yes,
Sorry.
yes.
Keep going.
So that there's a moment at the end of the day after you do this reflection that a journal pops up, and it shows you the things that you did in the day and kind of records a little bit of like how you performed that day. But then there's like this input box that then you can type into, and you can say like, whatever it is that you want to say, or type in whatever you want. And kind of importantly, and this is like kind of a sneaky thing, so you can go back and look for yourself. That actually saves or it should save as a text file onto your computer.
I was wondering about that. Yeah, you're sneaky with that.
I was hoping, I was like, dear God, let this be saved somewhere.
So
like,
it should be in, I can't remember like exactly, but it should be like in the app data like folder of where the game is stored on your machine.
I don't want to dig into it.
So
I'm like kind of looking on the side right now, but I really shouldn't do that while we're recording.
Show in Finder, bundle of joy.
Exactly.
Totally. So like, but to your point, like, that was like something that when I got that feedback, I was like, well, I want the player to choose how they're feeling, and also I want to give them space to like express whatever was not expressed in the choices that I provided. But to kind of talk about like the writing process of how I went about like choosing those different paths.
Yes, please.
There was something about how, and this is like kind of, again, going back to like essay games as like as a project, as like a practice. I think that storytelling in games often really shoehorn specific like messages and specific like pathways, and or if they leave it open and make it more player agency, then they're over mechanized, like they're over metric driven, right?
Sure.
Where it's like, oh, you chose that, well then that unlocks this, and it kind of it's a little bit too like gamifying conversation and gamifying like, I don't know, introspection, right? Which like I think for some people is like really rewarding, and I've played games where that's executed at a really high level that I really enjoy. But for me, and for like essay games, I think like when I'm thinking about the approach of writing, I'm really thinking about like, how do you present like a spectrum of perspectives about what you're experiencing, and let those be moments in which the player can be, I don't know, like slightly antagonistic towards the story.
Like have agency like with the narrative pieces, as opposed to, because you were sort of keep going. I'll summarize later.
I was going to say a specific example that I can think of is that at the end of the second day, and this isn't spoiling, it doesn't get into too much stuff, but at the end of the second day, there the reflection that you do is that you're like, oh, I got through the end of the second day. I'm so tired. And then it says like, today I was feeling, and then you have these three choices, and the three choices are confident, blah, and frustrated. I think that those are the three choices.
Yeah, that sounds right. Yeah.
And I think that like that to me was designing the game was to be like, I want there to be an experience where like blah is okay. Like, you know what I mean? And so like, that's what I mean about being not like antagonistic is maybe not the right word. It's to be like, I don't care about the narrative. I don't like, or like, I'm just feeling nothing. And like, and that's fine.
Yeah.
The way I was going to riff on it is like, it sounds like maybe what you're trying to reach for is like actually space to be introspective with like literary or textual information. Cause like, I think it is true that like, as we've gotten deeper, I mean, games have been text-based for a long time, and like some of those earlier text games, I'm trying to stay like, have this remain legible to like a listener. The point is that like, as games have like gotten more and more ambitious in terms of like the interlocking of narrative and play mechanics, it's like often enough there's a deference to like, you said this, so you unlock this gun, as opposed to like, you said this, how does that make you feel? Like the game doesn't give place. Sorry, I pop off about Zelda pretty often, and I'm not going to celebrate. The writing is fine in the new Zelda games, but something I talk about in the new Zelda games pretty often is like, they're games that give you space to contemplate, and those games tend to do it with like visuals and like, but they do it with player agency. I'm talking a lot. But it's like, I guess like, to bring it back to Bundle of Joy, it's not just like I can write whatever I want. It's like, I don't know exactly how it achieves it. And then I imagine you've some idea of how it achieves it. But would you agree with like what I'm saying? Like the idea that like, it's there's choices that lead to more questions in a way, maybe, or something like that, or
100%. I think that one
cool.
thing that narrative designers and writers, maybe not narrative designers, but but certainly I think like writing in larger scale AAA games are tend to be uncomfortable with ambiguity.
Mhm.
And I think that ambiguity can be a wonderful and powerful literary device for
Mhm.
contemplation, and for not just contemplation, but really putting the player in the moment, right?
Mm, mm,
If if you introduce a bit of uncertainty and a bit of lack of resolution, then that gives the player so much agent, so much kind
Mm.
of passive agency to
mhm.
fill in how they feel about the thing that they're playing,
Sure.
right?
Like starting from blah and then like going from blah, like there's more of a gradient of like space kind of, or
Yeah,
we're getting
yeah.
real like
No, this is good.
heady.
I'm all for it. I
Cool.
think for me, it's like I like comparing. I think looking at like equivalent comparisons is really helpful. So like in
Uh-huh.
like the Quantic Dream games, like that's like the Become Humans and like Detroit Become Human in those games. And like in sometimes, yeah. Anyways, we'll stick with that. You know,
Sure.
it's at the end of those. They're very narrative based. They're very choice based, right? But at
Sure.
the end of every one of those levels, it shows you like a percentile of like what you've
Uh-huh.
unlocked in that
Mm.
And
narrative branch.
that's like problematic.
I,
Sorry, I'm
I
not trying to get to your conclusion ahead
no,
of you,
you're
but
there. Like,
sure.
for me, I think that that does such a disservice to what writing can do, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And
I
what
see what you
narrative can
mean.
do, just
Yeah.
beyond like the text on the page, but what storytelling and narrative process can unlock for people, right?
Mhm.
Yeah.
If
Yeah.
you're going to just slap a number onto it, then you've kind of curtailed the potential for someone to have feelings about the choices that they made, right? Their
Sure.
choices get
Yeah.
those
Or
feelings get
imagination or any sort of open-endedness. Yeah.
exactly. They
Yeah.
get supplanted by a metric, by a number, right? You
Right.
could
Right. Right.
end a level and be like, man, I really don't know about that choice. Like that seems so kind of out of care. And then you start seeing this number tick up and you're like, ah, damn, I didn't unlock the cool thing, like
I
this other
should have done
ending.
happy.
Yeah. Like
Ugh.
Right, exactly.
you
And
stop
that's
thinking in a way
Yeah.
and just
Yeah.
start
Yeah.
like
exactly.
reacting or like
Yes.
Yeah.
moving
Yeah.
or yeah.
100%.
Truly.
So that was like kind of what I wanted to make sure that I left that space in Bundle of Joy, right? And I think in essay games in general
Right.
is like trying to make sure that you kind of walk. I want to walk players through the door, for lack of better,
Mhm.
phrasing. But then it's kind of their position, or hopefully I give them enough room to then decorate that space however they want to.
Yeah.
You can bring a horse to water.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. But also, like, I mean, not to extend that metaphor too
keep
much,
going.
they also need to be thirsty, right? So like,
Sure.
Yes.
so like,
I like
Is
that.
the horse thirsty?
but no, I mean, like in reality, right? Like, I think that we become so inured with narrative within games that we expect this kind of call and response, right? Like,
Mhm.
we expect when we make a choice that we'll have the Clementine will remember this thing in the upper right hand corner, like, or whatever.
Clementine. Is that the horse?
That's like the like Left 4 Dead Telltale games. Like, they had this
Oh,
mechanic
okay.
where you make choices and the character you make a choice and then there's a freeze frame on them and it says the character will remember this. And you're like,
okay.
okay, I guess I made a pivotal choice there.
It's
Yeah.
quantified. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
True.
And then
So
all you're
anyways.
thinking about is that choice that you made in the past, not even thinking about what's ahead of you, which is kind of bad too.
Yeah.
I mean,
Well,
that's my worry, right? Is that like
Yeah.
we become so kind of like, I think game players have become so expectant of having that immediate feedback of what they're
Mhm.
doing in the
Mm.
game, that they're not very well conditioned to have contemplative experiences
Like
and
not
reflective.
knowing.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly.
I rail on this show pretty often about like how like gamers like I'm a gamer. I'll say it. No, but truly like people who play games like literally games are like things that are learned kind of, right? And so like there tends to sometimes be like an addiction to like I want to know. Like I want to know what to do the thing because it make me feel good. And like
Right.
that is functional to games, but I tend to be Like I'm loving what you're saying because of how like often enough I am drawn to like what are these like more open-ended spaces in games. Like
Yeah.
yeah.
And I think it's like I think that there's been a course correction to a certain extent. I think that there are becoming more games that are willing to do that ambiguous thing. Or there are more games that are like not just like, quantifying or what have you.
Mhm.
But I still think that there is such a long process of kind of acculturating people to a certain type of response that it's still taking time to like wrench people out of that expectation.
It's been like 40 years of video games, which are this like weird narrative interpretation of other game. Like we're still figuring it out.
Yeah.
Mm.
It
Mhm.
almost sounds like you come from maybe like a writing background or something like that. I'm curious about how'd you get into making games, or if that was always your kind of like target destination.
It was not always my target destination. And I was touching on this a little bit before, so I'm like glad to revisit it. But I went to like art school. I went to like
Mhm.
the School of the Art Institute of Chicago, and
Ah.
I initially went as a painter,
Wow.
and I was like
Oh.
not a very good painter,
Aw.
but it's okay.
I'm sure you
I'm
were
over
great.
it. I'll
Let's
say
just
this,
leave it
I was
open ended.
I was good enough to get into the school, so I'll just like
Sure.
leave it at that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And but really kind of quickly I knew that I wanted to move into moving image work. I knew that I wanted
Mhm.
to like, I knew I like wasn't very my heart wasn't into painting, even though like I liked doing it and I really
Yeah.
appreciated it. I really wanted to be making video and film work.
Mhm.
And so I started doing that at school, and I was making really kind of experimental uh film, a lot of it that was like really interested in like in that kind of like medium, what you would call like the plasticity, which is like literally like the material of the film, right?
Mhm.
So I was
Oh.
like making scratch films, and I was making
Whoa.
like
Cool.
I was like hand processing my film. I was making like films that were what you would call kind of cameraless films, which would be like you would expose them in these very particular ways, and then you would like optically print them. There was like very experimental,
Whoa.
very
Sure.
Love
expressive.
that. Yeah.
But it was like it was oversimplifying, but it was like painting in motion, right? It was like this.
Yeah.
Yeah. In time.
And so
Yeah.
exactly, and so I was really interested in that. I was like very deeply invested in like working with film and doing hand processing and all this stuff. And then I graduated school and I like lost access to like all that stuff.
Oh my god.
And film, it's even more so now, but film is an expensive
Crazy
medium.
expensive.
Yes,
Yeah.
sir.
And so I was like broke, and I like had no dark room, and I didn't have an apartment that I could do hand processing in.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
And I was like, well, what the hell am I going to do? So I actually initially started getting into animation, and I started just doing little bits of pencil and paper animation, just like kind of photographing
hard.
things,
Yeah.
just hand drawn animation. And then started getting into, at the time I was living with some friends that were really into open source software. And
Cool.
they were running this very cool community computer lab, and that was running open source software.
Mhm.
And so just naturally, they were like, "Oh, have you heard of Blender?" And I was like,
There it
"No,
is.
no, I hadn't heard about that." And so I checked it out, and I started teaching myself how to do 3D modeling and 3D animation, and kind of like kept going with that. And then I was like, I'm really enjoying making animations and making 3D animations and making 3D modeling, 3D models. But I want there to still be the storytelling thing that was like kind of missing.
Yeah.
And at the time I was like, and I wanted to maybe have a little bit of, some call and response, right? It's not just
Mhm.
like something you're seeing on a screen or like in what, you're just looking at, but you want to have some interaction with. And I think also at the time, like I was seeing indie games become like a thing,
Yeah.
right? I was
Yeah.
seeing indie games like starting to break out into like
keep going. Sorry.
yeah, no. That was it's good. I think it's really good
What
context.
year was this? Yeah.
Like I would say like 2007, 2008.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
So like it was kind of like maybe around the time when like Braid was really first like
Yeah.
coming out, right? Like
Sure.
breaking out, or like Fez, right? Like
Yeah.
Fez. I remember when like
Yeah.
playing Fez and being like, "Whoa, who made this?"
A
Like,
person
this
made
is
this?
right,
crazy.
exactly,
Yeah.
And so I was like, "Oh, I want to do something in this medium. I want to be doing stuff like this." And so I started making things that were kind of these interactive game animation pieces that were mostly for gallery settings,
Okay.
mostly
Cool.
in a fine art setting. And then I made like a game proper, and I found this like whole new audience, and I was like, "Oh, I want to keep exploring this path, and I want to
Yeah.
keep like finding this audience that's looking at the stuff and playing it, and having these kind of conversations where as soon as they start experiencing the thing, they're like, I want to talk to this person about this." And that wasn't something up until that point that I was getting in film, but I wasn't getting necessarily like in a gallery space setting. So yeah,
Okay.
so then I kind of
Yeah.
like zagged and was
Yeah.
like, I want to be making games. I want to be trying to make the stuff, and I was still kind of like making them as an artist and really thinking about them as like artworks. And then and kind of then long story short, I was like, now I want to make a more commercially minded thing, and that is Bundle of Joy.
Love it.
Bada boo, full circle.
Bingo,
Yeah, no,
bango.
truly, because I wanted to cut in when you were talking about people like talking to you. I wanted to chime in with a callback of like they're reaching across the table, telling you that this is good birth control. But I was like, no, like we'll get back to the game eventually. But beautiful. So this is your first commercial release. Is that
Yes.
what's
Oh,
nested
cool.
in there?
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Truly. Yeah.
Yeah, I'd made I'd made kind of like two bigger, or not like bigger, but like kind of substantially sized games previously. One of them is also on Steam that's called The Last Survey, and that's a hand drawn visual novel.
Sure.
Sick.
And it's pretty short. It's like maybe even the same length as Bundle of Joy, but the gameplay is like very, very limited. It's basically all writing. It's very prosy. It's like not,
Click,
and it's
click A to advance page of book.
it's like enter.
not
It's basically enter.
Yeah,
So
sure.
yeah, it's a visual novel. It like totally abided by those conventions. And and then I made this other game that was kind of this first person adventure game that's called The Trolley. But both of those games, like I said, were kind of thought of more as being like in an art context than they were like commercial context.
Interesting.
Sure.
Wow. I saw that. This is totally off topic, but I saw this funny meme the other day. I was like, it's like talking to like dude who doesn't know what a movie is, and it was like, hey, look at these 130,000 photos. And he was like, what? And he was like, that's too many photos. And the other person was like, it's okay, they go really fast.
Really
and
fast.
Like, that makes it worse.
Yeah.
It's like,
That's
just
film.
talking frames.
Yeah. That's film. But yeah, I mean, sorry, that was like a super long-winded way of saying like during that process, or to answer your actual question, during that process along the way, I was like writing a lot of like critical pieces, like that were kind of about like art and technology, kind of about games. And so I've always kind of had this like writerly background, and a lot of the games kind of start as pieces of writing. Definitely like The Trolley and The Last Survey kind of started as pieces of writing. And then, the prototype that I described before for what became Bundle of Joy was like mostly writing first and then like design afterwards.
Yeah.
And in this way, it was like kind of a completely different experience where I did the opposite.
I want to make sure that we ask about the music in the game, because I had a whole running theory about, because I wanted to like dig into the divide between the mini games and but it's like I think we've like sort of we've talked about a lot of stuff, but truly, like, how did you think about wanting to use? This is a pretty hard pivot, but I just wanted to make sure we like focused on the music a little bit
100%
on the show. Like, how did you think about the music in the game?
Yeah, so all of the soundtrack and all of the game, the sound effects in the game are designed by Ethan DeSueltes.
Thank you. Yeah, that's my second question.
Yes,
Ethan DeSueltes, got you.
And Ethan is an amazing musician and chiptune artist and organizer, and just like an awesome person. And I actually got put in touch with Ethan through a mutual friend of ours, because Ethan was starting to kind of do a little bit more soundtrack work. And it was just this, I was literally just telling the story last night, so it's very friend of mine. But we had a meeting and I was like, so this is what the game's about. It's about this thing and blah, blah, blah. And he's like, oh, I'm a dad. I kind of like, I get some of this stuff. And I was like, okay, cool. So like we had to talk about this stuff. And then he kind of went away and like worked on a couple of tracks and came back. And they were more like his house style, which is a little bit more like aggressive, a little bit more like drum and bassy and breakbeaty. And I was like, like these are great tracks. Like I really love these songs. But they're not quite fitting the mood of the piece.
Yeah.
And he was like, okay. And he was like, I remember this moment where we were having this meeting. He was like, so like, is the game like funny? And I was like, yeah, there's like humor in it. It's like pretty lighthearted, even though it's like about serious stuff.
Yeah.
He's like, yeah, because like I didn't think of that when you were first telling me about it. But what if the songs were like more like ska? And I was like, yeah, run with that. I was like,
what if they were?
Yeah. And so I was like, that sounds way more like closer to the aesthetic of what I was going for. And that was just kind of like peppy and upbeat and kind of like poppy, like a little bit of swing in it, right? But also kind of like a little bit repetitive, like a little bit like this beat and this metric. And so then he sent me back a very early version of what's now the kind of mini game theme, the song that plays in the majority of the game.
Yes.
And I was like, this is perfect. This is exactly the hitting on the line between joyful and like enthusiastic and starting to, but also starting to be like grading over time.
Totally.
Yes. And we wanted to initially, when we were designing the sound for the game, we wanted initially to have the tempo of that title track start to increase incrementally after every mini game. But it was too intense.
Too stressful.
It was like making you sweat.
Well, it started like it started become too saturating. It was just like no, thank you. And I was like, okay, let's really
But being a dad's not that bad.
Well, I was just like, we want people to play it. Right? Like, we don't want to like have people just like too irritated by it. But yeah, so that was like this kind of like, we talked about, Ethan and I talked about this a lot, where we talked about like how kids' toys operate in the same way, right? That like you have a kid's toy and you like hear the kid's toy, like, electronic toys, like make the sound the first time and you're like, oh, that's cute. But then when they make it like the 100th time, you're like, I want to throw that thing in the trash. So that's not exactly, I don't feel that way about the music. I love the soundtrack of this game. But it's like that thing about like, when you get to day 4 and you're like hearing the music cue up again after the downtime, you're like, all right, here we fucking go again.
You've internalized a lot of like cues associated
a little like Pavlovian thing going on too. Probably
100%.
Crack my knuckles. Let's go.
No, totally. That was like a big thing. And again, we always wanted to be this kind of bite-sized thing too.
Yeah.
Right. Ethan, and I talked about this a lot where, we didn't want to be like, oh, let's create a soundtrack theme for this segment of the game that's like 4 minutes long. It's like, no, let's make it like a minute long that can have it loop. And like, we know that you're going to be hearing it kind of on loop. And that's going to be a contributing factor for sure.
Okay. We're almost at an hour.
Yeah.
And I've got one more question I want to ask. Which, we've asked it of other developers in the past, like in like a working context. The question is, how do you rest? And I especially wanted to ask it to you, like both like as a creator, sure, but like this game is so much about like, how do you rest? But truly, like, how do you rest?
Yeah, that's a great question. When we got on the call, I was talking about resting, which is so funny because today I like had a day off with my partner and we like watched a movie and it was very nice and slow. And
which movie did you watch?
Oh, we watched. You're cueing me up very well. We watched Flow. We finished watching Flow.
What did they animate Flow in?
They animated it in Blender.
Sorry,
it's great and. People that haven't seen it, I would highly recommend it.
Mhm.
But how do I think now that I'm done with the process of making the game, I really want to get back into reading. I used to be a very active fiction reader.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
And during the past 6 months, that's really dropped off. And I feel like I started maybe like 2 or 3 book series. Like I started the Stone Sky series, the N.K. Jemisin kind of
Mhm.
like sci-fi
Oh,
fantasy
cool. Yeah.
series. Very, very good. But
Cool.
I just read book 1. And I was like, oh, I should read the rest of these books. Haven't touched any of
Yeah.
the other ones yet.
Sure. Who's got the time?
So like that's one way that I rest. I think another way that I rest too is like by playing backlog stuff.
Oh.
I will tell this one thing. This is kind of like a funny thing that I like sharing. One thing that I think every game designer should have their comfort game in the same way that I think filmmakers have their comfort films.
Truly.
It's like the one, like the rest, right? Where you're like, I love this thing. I don't have to think about playing it. I know all of its beats and
Yeah.
measures and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And I'm just
Mhm.
gonna I'm just gonna dip into this a little bit and
Yeah.
have my little comfort
Yeah,
space.
it's comfy. Yeah.
Yeah. And that for me is
Please.
Final Fantasy VI.
Oh.
Yeah. And
Oh,
but
Buddha,
what I
whatever. Sorry,
oh
keep going.
God, my heart. But that but I so that's always been a comfort game for me. But like while I was developing this, I discovered the randomizer for it,
Oh.
which is so fun.
You
It's-
started freaking gaming
yes,
with it.
I got
like,
into it.
Yeah, you're
Well,
good.
because I knew the game. It was a comfort game, so I knew the game so well that like the randomizing was just like, oh, I just want to keep playing this game and have it be a little bit different every time that I'm playing it.
yeah, truly.
And so so like I had this thought the other day where I was like, oh man, I can't wait for like the next day off just to like play a round of the
Hell
randomizer.
yeah.
Like that's going to be super fun. Yeah.
It's repetitive. It's constantly changing, but repetitive, and you get in a
Yes.
groove with it. Much like raising a baby.
I was
Yeah.
gonna say we need a bundle of joy randomizer. I want to be the baby.
It's funny because like there's this place in New York City called Wonderville. It's this very cool.
Oh,
we know Wonderville. Yeah.
Yeah, they're very cool indie arcade, and I have thought about making an arcade version of Bundle of Joy,
Cool, sick.
which is basically like an endless mode. But you
Just
like
minigame.
minigame,
Yeah.
and to see how far you can get without
Awesome.
stressing out.
Yeah.
Sure.
It would have to be like a little bit redesigned because like there would have
Sure.
to be strategic moments of like when you got a pacifier and like when you
Yeah.
got things to basically prevent
Okay.
yourself from stressing
Yeah.
out, or like how
Yeah.
could you recoup? Because it wouldn't work as an arcade cabinet that then had these narrative moments where you de-stress.
The keyboard
That doesn't-
drops down.
yes,
You're like,
yeah.
oh, okay.
You're like, let me journal while
Yeah.
while I'm like sipping on a
bar.
drink.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So I'd have to like trying to think about how to redesign
cool,
it, but it's
though.
something that I've like thought about a lot because it's kind of lends itself to thinking about that.
I don't want to be armchair designer, but have you thought about like what the inputs would be? Like, would there?
So one of the thoughts that I've had about that version is that it would be actually like an asymmetrical design, so that one person would play as baby and then there would be other people
Yeah, dude.
playing as like the dads.
Hell
And
yeah.
so it'd be this like race against baby, like who
Oh
can
my
like
God.
change
So
baby's
fun.
diaper.
I'm just like poop and poop, poop, poop,
babies,
poop.
yeah, babies wriggling. Like,
yes,
wildly,
exactly. You're
yeah.
as the baby, you're like mashing buttons or like
Awesome.
spinning the joystick.
Holy shit!
And then
That
like
is
you're trying to like
so
duke
good.
out of the way of like getting fed or like getting the nebulizer treatment or whatever.
That rules.
So
So
awesome.
there's like that's like kind of percolating in the back of my mind, but for right now I'm gonna kind of bask in just having released the game.
Yeah, man.
You did it.
Congratulations. And where can people find you on the internet and follow your work and get the game and all that kind of stuff?
I'm back.
You're back.
Did you hear
Alon
me?
asked the basic. Did you hear Alon?
I did not.
Oh, I was just saying like congratulations, and then I said where can people like follow you online and check out your other work and get the game and all that kind of stuff?
Totally. You can follow me on Blue Sky. I'm SA Games there. If you just search that, you can find me there. You can find me on itch, sagames.itch.io. You can find Bundle of Joy also is there. You can find the game on Steam. And yeah, Blue Sky and the itch page are great.
Okay, cool.
Okay.
Cool.
Well, thanks for coming on the show.
Thanks.
Yeah. This is really
Thank
fun.
you so much for having me.
Yeah, of course.
Really
Yeah.
great questions and really valuable conversation. I really appreciate it, y'all.
Of course. Great answers.
Thanks.